So now I'm going to turn that question to the panelists, and then another introduction, because you'll notice that Reggie has changed.
That was the transition.
But you'll get introduction, someone just as important in getting the work done. So I'll ask the question and then add the introduction in there as well. So we have the question, how should we foster collaboration in outdoor industry and DI? And I'll push a little bit to kind of also explain what does collaboration look like to you? Like how do we foster it, and if you want to provide an example of what's worked well, just to keep pushing the question a little bit into what does it look like.
And I'll start. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. All right, I'm going to need a little bit more energy in that. I'm going to tell you right now, this is my second OR, and this is a beautiful site. Y'all can't see what I can see, but this is the most welcome that I've felt since I've been here. My name is Joe Bryant II, and I work for Reggie at VF Corporation. My role is the manager of inclusion and diversity. Directly, I support our Timberland brand, our Dickies brand, our workwear organization, our supply chain organization, and our digital organization. So several areas where we have strategies to improve, to make sure our workforce looks like this one. So I just wanted to say I love each and every one of you all, because this makes my heart smile to see so many people who are passionate about space. And as a nature novice, I'm looking forward to learning more about your angles. For me, and I have some notes here because this is important, around fostering collaboration. I was in several meetings today, yesterday, and I learned a lot. But the first thing that I'll say is we have to understand our history and lead with data. One thing I can understand about VF Corporation, they usually like to see other people, what they've done, so they can understand best practices. But understanding our history and the fact that, and I cannot take credit for this term, but the gentrification of recreation. And that was something I had a chance to speak with a member of the House of Representatives for New Mexico this morning around the Outdoor Equity Fund that they were able to pass, first of its kind in the country. She was very candid about some of the challenges that they face in policy, in voting, and now in implementation. And she talked about, particularly in the Rockies, how you have spaces that Native and indigenous people have been in for thousands of years, but someone who wants to come down quarterly to go fishing thinks it's an activity, when for them, it has historically been survival. And why are we not inviting these individuals to lead how we show up in those spaces, as opposed to developing those things and then retroactively inviting them because it makes us feel good, right? So that's the first thing, is understanding our history, understanding the history of the outdoors, and really one of my personal goals this fiscal year is taking the conversation from the top, right? So global brand presidents, functional leaders, and really speaking to the doers. Who's the VP of marketing? Who's the VP of consumer insights? Who's our community and sustainability teams that's making decisions? Jim Pisani for Timberland, he makes the high level decisions, but a lot of times he wants people to have strategies presented to him. The second thing around fostering collaboration, I think, as people in this room and within the industry, particularly larger corporations, have to align on our purpose, right? If our purpose is to continue to appreciate our environment, we have to appreciate the people native to those environments, who've been in those environments. So that way we can activate underrepresented groups. So I'll pause there, but I know Jose mentioned, again, I work with Reggie. Ariel is also in the room. And like I said, you all heard kind of the scope of my responsibility. Reggie spends a lot of his time focusing on the next 5 years, aligning with the enterprise and the global strategy. My job is to help the execution. So I definitely am open to any conversations that you all have. I really like the power of galvanizing, particularly with people in this room, as opposed to isolated thoughts that are so similar. How can we leverage this time like we're doing now to identify key themes that then I can take back to a Reggie or to my business partners, and we can figure out a strategy to activate. So
Awesome.
Good job.
Teresa.
I have so many thoughts on this idea of collaboration, and I also need some coffee, so I apologize. I'm not going to be the most articulate for the next few minutes. But for me, one of the biggest sources of struggle in this work in the last number of years is to see the way in which we have all been complicit in this structure that has not been created by us. So in thinking of the work that I do with the nonprofit and trying to find funding of all different varieties, we as in the queer community have not been the flavor of the month for this industry, and I think arguably still are not. And so it's been an interesting uphill battle for us in trying to figure out how we can come into this space. And because of the way that those things have been set up, we have often felt as though we are in competition with other groups like Latino Outdoors, Outdoor Afro, right? And these other entities. And that's been set up by the institution that we are trying to be a part of and to change, right? And so collaboration for me has looked most successful when we can take a step back, which is hard to do because we are all out here hustling and all out here very passionate about the work that we're trying to do. But take a step back and say, this company is really interested in working with me, but I don't see them engaging well with X, Y, or Z other groups that are also trying to be in this space. What's going on here, right? And this is a story that I have been hesitant to share for a number of years, but when I was first starting out, I had a meeting with a large entity in this industry in 2015, and they told me that they wouldn't be interested in funding us because my queer young people didn't represent enough discretionary income. And I was watching them support a number of colleagues and peers, and I was like, that's awesome, and like, how do I reconcile this, right? You so clearly don't want to work with me, and now I feel like I have to work even harder against these folks for whom I want to be working with, right? Because of the structure that you set up. So how do we, as organizations that are doing this work, have better communication with each other so that we can be talking about, like, how's this work working well for you? Where are there blind spots? How can we support each other in having these conversations? And then where things have worked well, I feel like the brightest spots for us are when folks are not concerned with making sure their name is a part of that conversation, right? They don't feel the need to have credit given to them in a very visible way, right? In those spaces, we've been able to cultivate some fantastic partnerships on the programmatic level, and now in the last 2 or 3 years with the brands, and it has allowed us to enter a space that I feel much better about being in, and feels way more authentic. So I think if we can take the time to step back and be a little bit more, analyze the situation in a little bit more of a critical way, to think about where are the blind spots, who hasn't been at this in these conversations, and how is the industry continuing to not engage with all of us in a really effective manner. I think that's one of my hopes and dreams.
Thank you. Teresa?
Jose?
I offered and I knew you would take it up. I'll add one thought and then we'll move on to the next question and then our closing. So the idea of collaboration, so 2 examples, right? One of them is you'll hear me share and you'll continue to hear me share. We brought this as Spark 2020 as well. 4 elements of network leading principles. And they're embedded actually in what was just reflected right now about like not taking credit. So those are mission over organization. What are we collectively actually aligned on and we stick to that? Trust, not control. Humility, not brand. And then constellations, not stars. And part of that work is saying we're going to get together around mission, and with humility, it's not important for my name or credit to be in this way because I know we're still doing the work and it still benefits us in a piece. And another example would be, so Teresa and I have been working on a series of kind of these community outdoor experiences and campouts, where the whole point is just to do this, but camping and hang out, and have fun, and get to know each other, right? And that's the kind of then be able to say our job is just as network weavers is to try to help make these connections, and then you decide how that's best going to happen, right? And kind of do that as one example. So that's going to lead me to the last question about, you all showed up because you saw this event in solidarity. So what does that look like to you? In solidarity. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? Including in knowing that it isn't just like this is what I need, but what is addressing a we. So what does In Solidarity look like now with the brand that I work with? What does In Solidarity look like with the peer and colleague that I work in this space, right? So realizing we've been in competition for too long without knowing it or discussing it, or knowing it and not discussing it. How do we move forward with that? Right. So what does that look like to you? And you can weave in the other aspects of what you've already been talking about. So moving forward, and even challenge you, how would you practice that? So it's the how. Go for it.